In the words of James Michael Anderson's son, the true story of the former Chief Dom of the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner. What the inside of a morgue is like at 2:30 in the night, most people have never thought about it, never had to. But me, I grew up inside the smell of formalin. When other kids recognized the smell of their mother's cooking, I recognized that sweet, rotten, musty smell of dead bodies. That was my normal. My father, James Michael Anderson, cut open dead bodies for 35 years. 35 years. Bloated, unclaimed corpses pulled from the East River, bodies torn to pieces lying beside railway tracks, heaps of decomposed flesh that couldn't be recognized as human. There was no corpse that hadn't passed through my father's hands. People used to say James Anderson had a stone set in his chest. The smell of death was like perfume to him. But even that stone can crumble to dust. I saw that with my own two eyes. My father didn't just go mad. My father burned in the fires of hell while still alive. And today, so many years after my father's death, I'm finding the courage to speak about that night for the first time. Even now, when I think of that night, my fingers tremble. A torrential downpour in the monsoon month. The sky seemed to have split open. The cold wind blowing from the direction of the East River was chilling to the bone. My father and I were sitting in the small restroom next to the morgue. Outside, there was only the continuous patter of rain, and every now and then, the rumble of thunder somewhere in the distance. Then the phone rang. From the hospital emergency. A suicide case. A girl. Died by hanging. Postmortem needed immediately. The police would hand over the body in the morning with their report. My father wasn't on duty that day, but it was an urgent call. He had to go. I went along too. My father had gotten old by then, lifting heavy corpses, pulling stretchers, passing instruments. I used to help with all of that. The moment the heavy iron gate of the morgue was opened, that familiar pungent smell hit my nose. But that day, something else seemed to be mixed into the smell. Something different, something heavier. Going inside, I saw a body lay on the stretcher, covered with a white sheet. 2 police constables and 1 sub-inspector were standing there. You could tell from their faces that they wanted to get out of that place as soon as possible. After handing over the paperwork and putting the forms in my father's hands, they practically ran out, as if they breathed a sigh of relief. My father put on his gloves, then slowly pulled the sheet back from the face. I froze. I've seen hundreds of corpses in my life, rotten, decomposed, mutilated, disfigured, all kinds. But when I saw this girl, my first reaction was disbelief. Such a beautiful person had ended her own life. It doesn't compute. She was 27 or 28 at most. Fair-skinned, though after death it had taken on a pale, bluish tinge. Her name was Isabella. The mark of the rope on her neck. Deep, dark, purple-blackish bruises. But the most terrifying thing was her eyes. Open, fully open. 2 cloudy pupils staring directly at me. It felt like she was seeing everything, understanding everything. She just couldn't move. I forced myself to look away. My father opened his old wooden box, the box with which he had a 35-year-old relationship. He took out the sharp autopsy scalpel from inside. At that exact moment, all the lights went out. Just like that, without any warning, the entire morgue was plunged into pitch-black darkness. Outside, the rain was raging. We had a generator connection, but it always took about a minute to start up. That 1 minute of darkness felt like an eternity. I was pulling out my mobile from my pocket to turn on the flashlight, and right then I heard it. A deep sigh. The sound spread throughout the entire morgue, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Then a whisper in the air, right next to my ear, as if someone was touching their lips to it and saying, "Don't touch." A cold current ran down my spine. Every hair on my body stood on end. My throat went dry as wood. I flinched and looked around in every direction. With trembling hands, I turned on the mobile flashlight. I swung the light around in all directions. No one, just me, my father, and that corpse. In a trembling voice, I said, "Dad, did you hear something? Someone just spoke." My father didn't answer right away. In the darkness, he pulled out a matchbox from his pocket, struck a match with a scrape, then produced a candle from somewhere and held it to the flame. In the flickering yellow light of the candle, I saw my father's face. A familiar face, but in that light, it looked somehow unfamiliar. The shadows were moving strangely in the hollows of his cheeks, in his eye sockets. My father, annoyed but in a grave voice, said, "Nonsense, son. It's the sound of the wind. These sounds happen when it rains. If you're going to be this scared cutting up bodies, it won't do." I fell silent. Maybe my father was right. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe my own mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe. By then the generator started. The tube light flickered on and off a few times, then lit up again. In the white light, the morgue looked the same as before. Stainless steel table, tiled floor, bottles of formalin arranged on the shelves against the wall. My father started working. I handed him water. Everything seemed normal. But then my father's eyes got stuck on something. While examining the rope marks on the girl's neck, my father suddenly stopped. His gaze fell on a spot just below the neck, where the collarbone begins. A thin gold locket hanging from a black thread. The chain had stuck to the skin in such a way that it seemed to have sunk into the flesh. Something was engraved on the surface of the locket, a design, some letters, which I couldn't clearly read in that light. In the morgue at that time, there wasn't a soul besides the two of us. And at that exact moment, the devil took hold. Not of my father's mind, but of my father's greed. Very carefully, with the manner of someone making sure no one notices, my father opened the locket. I saw his fingers working near the girl's neck. He was trying to unfasten the chain from the corpse's neck. My insides churned. I whispered, "Dad, this isn't on the police list. Put it back. There'll be trouble." My father turned and looked at me, glared at me. Then in a low but sharp voice said, "Keep quiet. It's not on the police list." If it was on the list, they would have taken it already. In a household of poverty, this little bit of gold is worth a lot. My father didn't tear the chain. Very skillfully, slowly, he removed the locket, took it in his hand. And the moment he took it in his hand trembled, as if the thing was cold as ice, or hot as fire. My father froze for a moment, then quickly shoved it into his pocket. We didn't know then, that locket was no ordinary piece of jewelry. It was a lock, and by opening that lock, my father had signed his own death warrant. The postmortem was finished by 4 in the morning. While we were washing our hands, my eyes went toward Isabella's face. I recoiled in shock. The expression on the girl's face had changed. What had been a still, empty stare now had something else. At the corner of her lips, a very slight, crooked smile lingered. That much only. But that much turned my stomach inside out. As if she was amused watching our foolishness. I said nothing. I told myself, rigor mortis, muscle contraction. There's a scientific explanation for all this. But science couldn't remove that smile from my head. When we got home, the Fajr prayer call was sounding. Our home was in the hospital quarters itself. On the ground floor, a small 2-room flat. My father went inside and changed his vest, then opened the wardrobe, folded inside old clothes, and hid the locket inside one of my mother's saris. My mother was in the kitchen, sitting with a bowl of rice. My father looked at me and touched his finger to his lips. "Keep quiet." I was exhausted. I didn't press the matter. I thought to myself, what's done is done. Tomorrow my father will probably go to a jeweler and sell it. Whatever money comes, comes. That day passed somehow. But the trouble started from the next night. My father and I sleep in the same room. My mother stays in the next room with my younger sister. That night too, there was a power cut. Muggy heat. I was lying by the window, my father on the other side of the bed. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up to a sound, a strange sound, as if someone was struggling terribly to breathe. The way it sounds when something is stuck in the windpipe. Gurgling, wheezing, a groaning like an animal whimpering. I sat up with a start. pulled the mobile out from under the pillow, and turned on the flashlight. The moment the light fell on my father, I turned to stone. My father was thrashing on the bed, drenched in sweat. His entire body was bent in an unnatural way, his spine arched backward like a bow. His eyes had rolled back into his head, only the whites visible. White foam was trickling from the corner of his mouth onto the pillow. And the most terrifying thing, it felt like an invisible someone was sitting on my father's chest, gripping his throat. My father's hands were trying to push something away in the air but couldn't grasp that something. Mom, look what's happening to Dad. My scream woke up the whole house. My mother came running. With great difficulty, we calmed my father down, splashed water on his face. My father sat up. He was trembling violently. His eyes were still wide, as if he had seen something terrible in front of him that still hadn't gone away. My mother gave him water. He took a few gulps. Then, panting, he whispered, "James, that girl came." "Which girl, Dad?" My father looked at me with poison-laden eyes. Then what he said pulled the ground from under my feet. "Isabella, the one whose body I cut up yesterday." My mother's face went white. She thought my father was probably having nightmares from thinking about corpses. She said, "You're overthinking. Go to sleep." My father said nothing more, but I noticed his eyes kept going toward the wardrobe. That wardrobe where the locket was hidden. That night, my father couldn't sleep again. He kept murmuring prayers all night. But this was just the beginning. Over the next 2 days, my father crumbled before my eyes. He stopped going to work. He would say, whenever he was alone, in the bathroom mirror, in the kitchen window, even in broad daylight, he could see Isabella. My father said the girl didn't walk normally. Her feet were reversed. One afternoon, coming back from the market, I found my father huddled in the corner of the room, a bowl in his hand, crying. When I approached, my father grabbed hold of me. A 35-year veteran Dom, who knew death like the back of his own hand, was crying like a child. "I went to the bathroom today, and Tulsa, my father said. In the mirror, I saw not my face, that girl's face. She tells me, 'Give it back.'" I said, "Then give it back, Dad. Return it. Hand it over to the police. Who knows whose thing it is? Maybe it's because of this that..." My father then lowered his head and began to cry. In a broken voice, he said, "I already sold it, son. With that money, I paid off the overdue bills for your mother's medicine. I paid your sister's exam fees. Where will I get it from now?" He had sold it. The goldsmith must have melted it down by now. Getting it back was impossible. My hands and feet went ice cold because I was beginning to understand my father's condition was not ordinary fear or mental stress. This was something else, and that something else had now nested in our home. 3 days later, my father made a decision. He would go meet Isabella's family. Perhaps if he asked for their forgiveness, perhaps if he gave them some money, this danger would pass. Isabella's address was in the police file. A remote area in Jersey City. We set out in the morning by bus, the two of us. Finding the house was very difficult. Isabella's mother came out, an elderly woman with deep dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in a long time. Upon learning who we were, she broke down in tears. My father told her everything properly. Isabella's death, the postmortem, some of the strange things that had been happening to us, but he was too scared to mention the chain theft. He only said he was seeing the girl in his dreams, that she was asking for something. He wanted to know, had the girl said anything special before her death? Did she have any unfulfilled wish? Isabella's mother wiped her eyes. Then what she said turned our blood to water. "Sir, my daughter was not normal." The woman began to tell us Isabella had fallen in love with a boy, but the boy didn't give her the time of day. Isabella had become obstinate. She had to have that boy no matter what. Her mother had tried to stop her many times, but Isabella wouldn't listen. She resorted to black magic. The woman brought out some pages from a burnt diary from inside the house, scorched by fire, but some writing was still legible. Oaths written in blood, incantations to summon the devil, strange symbols. Isabella's mother said, "It was written in that diary. To take the devil's help, you must sacrifice what you love most." Isabella did that. The marriage happened with that very boy, but dealing with the devil isn't that simple. 1 month into the marriage, the boy died in a truck accident, and after that, the devil began to demand what Isabella owed him. Unable to bear it, Isabella hanged herself. But even before dying, she told me, the woman's voice was trembling, "Mother, don't let anyone open the chain on my neck. Inside it, I've tried to imprison that devil. If it's opened, he'll be set free." My father's face was white as a dead man's. I understood then. By removing the chain, my father hadn't freed Isabella's soul. My father had released the devil that was imprisoned inside that chain. And what had been coming to my father in Isabella's form, that wasn't Isabella. That was that thing. It was spreading confusion. My father couldn't hold it in anymore. Trembling, he confessed about stealing the chain. Then asked, "What's the way out now, sister?" The woman sighed deeply. In that sigh was exhaustion, grief, and a little anger too. There was only one way: to bury the chain with the body. Now the body is in the grave, and the chain isn't even with you anymore. You've made a terrible mistake, brother. Now there's no way out except asking God for forgiveness. Whoever has that chain, that thing won't rest until it takes their blood. We returned home, but from the moment we got on the bus to go back, I realized someone was with us. My father and I were on the back seat of the bus. Suddenly, my father clutched my hand. His fingers were cold as ice. He whispered, "Look, outside the window." I looked. Evening was descending. Rows of trees on both sides of the road. I saw nothing. My father said he could see a shadow running alongside the bus through the trees, shaped like a human, but faster than the bus. And its eyes were glowing even in the dark. We reached the city all right, but we brought death along with us. The moment we stepped into the house, a foul stench hit our noses, exactly like when a rat or cat dies and rots. My mother came running. She was startled by my father's appearance. Dark circles under his eyes, his skin a pale gray, as if the blood was drying up from his veins. My mother asked, "What's this burning smell, and why are you so late?" I tried to reassure her. "It's nothing, Mom. Dad's not feeling well. A little rest and he'll be fine." But I knew this was no ordinary illness. That night, my father ate nothing. He lay on the bed in silence. My mother and I sat in the drawing room, whispering. My mother was saying a smell of rotten meat was coming from the room. Wouldn't go away. She had mopped the entire room with fennel, but still. As the night deepened, the situation started getting worse. Power cut. In the candlelight, the room looked haunted. The shadows on the walls seemed to be moving on their own. Then that sound from my father's room. Groaning, but not like a human voice. The whimper of an animal. I rushed in. I found my father not on the bed. He was sitting on the floor, his body contorted, and with both his hands, he was gripping his own throat. He couldn't breathe. His body was burning hot. Fever was consuming his body. I put my ear close and heard my father was muttering faintly, "She's come. She's come." The next morning we decided we would take my father to a doctor. All this about ghosts, spirits, jinn, it's all in the mind. My father's condition must be from excessive stress and fear. It can be explained by science. We went to the psychiatry department of the New York City office of Chief Medical Examiner. There was a familiar older colleague there, Dr. William, an intern doctor. After examining my father, he said, "Uncle is suffering from severe trauma depression. He's hallucinating. Working with corpses for so many years has put a strain on the mind. We call this post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. I'm prescribing sleeping pills and antidepressants. A few days of rest and he'll be fine." The doctor's words gave me some relief. I told myself, yes, This is the logical explanation. We're not uneducated people. Can one believe in ghosts and spirits in this day and age? There's a chemical imbalance in my father's brain. That's why he's seeing things. I bought the medicine from the pharmacy and gave it to my father. Under the influence of the medicine, my father fell asleep. But that sleep was not normal. Even in his sleep, he was flailing his arms and legs. And every now and then, I swear on my life, his body would rise a few inches above the bed, then drop back down with a thud, as if an invisible someone was pulling him up with a rope, then letting go. 3 in the morning. I suddenly noticed my father's breathing had stopped. I placed my hand near his nose. Nothing. His chest wasn't moving. I was about to scream. Right then, my father opened his eyes. I will never forget those eyes in my life. My father's pupils had completely rolled back, but he was looking right at me. Don't ask me how he was seeing without pupils. Then he smiled. But that smile wasn't my father's. His face contorted, as if someone else was underneath the skin who couldn't fully take control of the face. Then, in a heavy, living dead voice, he spoke. Medicine? What kind of medicine are you feeding him? I've mixed into his blood. Having said this, my father lost consciousness again. I was trembling violently. This was no medical case. Doctors, medicine, science, all useless here. There was something here that was beyond our reach. The next morning, I went to a faith healer, a very old man. He lived in Staten Island, but had come to the city for his son's treatment at the time. An old-fashioned man who had seen a lot. I told him the entire story, left nothing out. Finding the chain while cutting the body, my father's greed, stealing the chain, selling it, everything. He listened. The creases on his forehead deepened. Then he sighed and said, You've made a very grave mistake, son. Things from a corpse, especially a corpse whose death was not natural, on whom dark sorcery had been performed. You can't even imagine the danger of touching such things. Then he told an old story. There was a Dom here, David. He was brave, but he had one terrible flaw. He used to steal things from corpses. Father Michael had warned him many times, but David would say, Dead people cursing? What are you on about? One day, the corpse of an old man killed in a bus accident came in. On his wrist was a copper bangle with strange designs engraved on it. David took it off and kept it for himself. That night, a terrible scream came from David's room. People rushed in and saw David was floating in the middle of the room. His feet were 2 arm lengths above the ground. His body was twisted like wrung-out wet cloth. An unknown sound was coming from his throat. Not a human language, not an animal's either. Something else. Father Michael had summoned the courage to recite prayers that day. The louder he recited, the louder David screamed. At one point, David dropped to the ground with a thud. When they went close, they saw the copper bangle on his hand had sunk into the flesh, as if it had become burning hot and was searing down to the bone. David didn't survive. Before dying, he only said, He didn't let me go, Father. Father Michael looked at me and said, Your father's condition could be worse than David's, because David only took one thing. Your father has taken something that was used to imprison a devil. That chain was a lock, and your father has broken that lock. It won't let go easily. I grabbed Father Michael's hand and broke down crying. Save my father! Father Michael placed his hand on my head. Stop crying. Have faith in God. I'll come at night, but remember, this is not some ordinary spiritual healing or exorcism. This is a war. At 11 at night, Father Michael arrived. With him were a few of his students and necessary supplies. Incense sticks, rose water, old scripture. Before even entering the house, Father Michael stopped at the doorstep. His face became grave. He said, There's a very foul thing inside your house. I can sense its presence from right here. Be very careful. We went inside. My father was lying in bed, his hands and feet tied to the bed with ropes. I had tied him myself because in the evening he had tried to attack my mother. he gestured to his students. They went to the four corners of the room and began reciting prayers. The moment Father Michael's recitation began, my father's body bent in an unnatural way, taut like the string of a bow, rising up from the bed. He began pulling at the rope so hard that the legs of the bed were scraping and screeching against the floor, foam from his mouth. Father Michael sat at my father's bedside. He placed his hand on his forehead and began reciting. The moment his hand touched, my father let out such a scream that the walls shook. That scream was not from a human throat. It sounded as if thousands of jackals were howling at once. Then from my father's mouth, no, not from my father's mouth, in someone else's voice, words came out. You think you can hold me? You have one foot in the grave. Now you want to put my body in the grave too? Father Michael didn't flinch. He recited even more forcefully. A kind of steam began to rise from my father's body. Hot, musty, smelling of rot. Suddenly my father looked at me, but that gaze was not my father's. The voice changed too. Soft, pitiful, feminine. Brother, save me. They're burning me alive. I was startled. That voice, Isabella's voice. Father Michael sternly said, Don't you dare. Don't do anything. Stay where you are. Instantly the voice changed. Now heavy, hoarse, savage. You think I'm alone? Look who's standing behind you. We all flinched and looked behind us. No one was there. But that was the trap. In that brief moment, the time we spent looking behind him, my father wrenched his hands free of the ropes with a violent jerk. Humanly impossible to break those thick ropes barehanded. But my father didn't have human strength at that point. The moment his bindings broke, my father lunged at Father Michael's throat. Father Michael's students and I grabbed him. But my father's strength was equal to 10 men. Father Michael pulled out a small bottle from his pocket. Water. He sprinkled it on my father's face. My father screamed as if acid had been splashed on him. Father Michael stood up panting, sweat on his forehead, his turban had fallen off. He looked at me and said, Time is running out. It's weak right now, but it will gather strength again. Something decisive must be done right now. That chain, it wasn't just gold. It was a pact. Isabella had made a deal with the devil, and that chain was the symbol of that deal. We now have to forcibly expel this devil. It's extremely dangerous. I said through my tears, Father Michael, do whatever you think is best. I just want my father back. Father Michael took out 7 iron nails and a hammer from his bag. He said, I'm going to seal this room. 7 nails, 7 prayers. I'll drive them into the door and windows. This way, it won't be able to escape, but it will become even more ferocious then. None of you be afraid. When Father Michael drove the first nail into the door, a fierce wind began outside. The window panes rattled violently. It felt like the entire house was shaking. And my father's body began to float in the air. 2 feet above the bed, his head hanging downward, arms and legs spread out, floating upside down. In that very state, he looked at me and said, Do you all really think you can hold me by driving nails? Do you want your father to live? Open the door. Father Michael shouted, Don't look into his eyes. He's trying to hypnotize you. But I made the mistake. I looked into my father's eyes, and the moment I did, I felt as if I was falling into a deep, bottomless, dark well. Everything around me was blurry. A voice from somewhere was saying, Open the door. My hand began moving toward the door latch on its own. No! Father Michael's shout brought me back to my senses. He yanked me away from the door in one swift motion. At that very moment, a tremendous blow came from outside the door, as if a wild elephant was striking it with all its might. The wooden door creaked and shuddered. Father Michael gestured for me to hold my father's feet down. Trembling, I grabbed them. My father's body was cold as ice, but something was squirming under the skin, moving like snakes, beneath the skin, inside the flesh. Father Michael began driving nail after nail. With every hammer blow on each nail, he was reciting prayers at the top of his voice. From my father's mouth, foam and a black-colored liquid were pouring out. This battle went on for nearly an hour. The moment the last nail was driven in and the prayer was recited, suddenly, everything stopped. My father's convulsions ceased. The howling wind outside died down. The heavy, rotten air inside the room seemed to lighten a little. My father lay limp on the bed, eyes closed, breathing slow but continuing. Father Michael wiped the sweat from his brow and said, "For now, the danger has been contained. I've sealed the room. It won't get help from outside anymore. But what's inside hasn't fully gone. It's in a dormant state. Your father's body has suffered a lot of damage. Let him rest. I'll come back at 5 in the morning. Until then, no one leaves this room and no one is let in." Father Michael went to the next room to rest. I placed a chair in front of the door and stood guard. The entire day's ordeal, the mental strain, my body was giving out. I tried my absolute hardest to stay awake, but my eyelids were heavy as stone. At some point, I don't know when, my eyes closed and I didn't even realize. Perhaps that wasn't a natural sleep. Perhaps that too was the devil's doing. I had a dream. My father was standing at the edge of a dark pit. Hundreds of black hands were reaching out from the pit, dragging him down. My father was looking at me, opening his mouth, wanting to scream, but no sound was coming out. I woke up with a jolt. My heart was pounding. I checked the time on my phone, 3:09 at night. Power cut. The hurricane lamp's light was flickering, about to die. I looked toward the bed. My father's bed was empty. I searched like a madman. Bathroom, kitchen, everywhere. He was nowhere. The door latch was open from inside, meaning, while I was sleeping, my father had opened it himself and gone out. My mind stopped working. Then, as if someone was pulling me along, my feet carried me straight toward the hospital. Only one thought was spinning in my head. My father had gone there. His workplace, the place of his sin, the place of his punishment. The road was completely deserted. A light drizzle. The street dogs let out mournful howls when they saw me. That sound is still stuck in my ears, as if they were trying to warn me. The hospital gate guard tried to stop me. I shoved him aside and ran straight toward the morgue. The morgue gate was open. The moment I went inside, that smell, formalin and rotting corpses. But today, something else was mixed in it, the smell of burning flesh. Exactly what had been emanating from my father's body for the past few days. I ran down the corridor. I stopped dead at the door of the autopsy room. From inside came the sound of groaning, and alongside it, a clanking noise, as if something metallic was hitting the table. I pushed the door. It creaked open. I was not prepared for the scene inside. No human being could be prepared. In the middle of the morgue, on the main autopsy table, my father was lying, wearing a blue hospital gown. Eyes open, but the pupils rolled back to white. In his hand was that sharp autopsy scalpel, and he was holding it against his own throat. His hand was shaking. He was desperately trying to pull the hand away, but couldn't, as if someone else was controlling his hand. "Dad!" I screamed and ran. But before I could reach the table, an invisible force flung me against the wall. I couldn't move, as if someone was pressing me down. Tons of weight on my chest. Lying there helplessly, I watched. From the dark corner of the room, a shadow emerged. In the dim light, I saw clearly. Isabella, but her feet weren't touching the ground. She was floating. Her face was grotesque. That beautiful face was now decayed, disfigured, broken. She went close to my father's ear and whispered something. And with that, my father's hand pressed hard against his throat. I tried to scream. No sound came from my throat. The blade sliced through my father's windpipe in one stroke. Blood spurted out onto the table, the floor, streaming over that cold stainless steel. My father thrashed for a few moments, then went still. That shadow then leaned over my father's body. It seemed to be reaching into the wound on his throat, searching for something. I couldn't hold on to consciousness any longer. When I came to, it was morning. I was lying on my own bed in my room. How did I get here? I was at the morgue. Who brought me? I ran to the morgue. Police and hospital staff were gathered around my father. Everyone was saying Dom James Michael Anderson had committed suicide. But I know the truth. When the police were lifting my father's body to put it into a body bag, one constable cried out, "Sir, what's this?" In the wound on his throat, inside that raw, gaping wound, something was glinting. I crawled forward. I saw, from inside my father's slit throat, a gold chain was peeking out. That chain, the one my father had sold, the one the goldsmith had melted down. It had come back, inside my father's body. The forensic report stated, before death, James Anderson had possibly swallowed the chain himself. But I know, I saw with my own eyes that night what had happened. After my father was buried, I never went back to that job, never stayed in that area again. The police had taken the chain as evidence. I heard that a few days after it was kept in the evidence room, the chain disappeared, and the police officer who was in charge of it lost his mental stability. That morgue of the New York City office of Chief Medical Examiner still exists today. I've heard that strange sounds are still heard there at night. In the dead of night, they say you can hear the voice of Dom James Michael Anderson. And me, even after so many years, sometimes when I wake up at night, I feel like I can hear the jingling of chains. I feel like my father is standing at my bedside and whispering, "Don't be greedy, son. Don't be greedy." Greed. It is a thing that blinds a person. And what lurks in that darkness, no one knows it until they reach out and touch it with their own hands. I hope those of you who have listened from the beginning until now have enjoyed this as well. If you like this story, then please share our channel with your friends and make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell icon.